The Draven estate woke like a well-rehearsed symphony. Servants glided through hallways, trays balanced with silver precision, while sunlight spilled across polished marble floors as if it, too, had been trained where to shine. Victoria Draven sat at the far end of the breakfast table, posture so flawless it could have been sculpted. One manicured hand rested on her teacup, the other held a letter sealed with gold wax, the kind of stationery that made people feel both flattered and nervous. Across from her sat Robert Draven, deep in the morning paper. He was the kind of man who could read stock reports with the same passion other men reserved for love letters. His every movement whispered control, and even the butter knife seemed to obey him. Between them sat Elena, dressed elegantly but wearing the tired look of someone trapped in a conversation she hadn't even started yet. She idly traced circles on her napkin with the tip of her spoon, pretending not to notice her mother's assessing stare. "Elena," Victoria said finally, her voice soft but carrying command, like perfume carries presence. "Gregory Miller's family will be hosting a dinner next week. I've confirmed our attendance." Elena didn't look up. "How thrilling! I've always wanted to discuss yacht dimensions over soup." Robert folded the newspaper neatly, lowering it just enough to reveal a patient, warning smile. "Gregory is a good man, respectable. His family contributes significantly to the Celestia Foundation, the same one funding your art programs if you've forgotten." "Oh, I haven't forgotten," Elena said, still stirring nothing in her cup. "Hard to forget something constantly reminded of. Gregory Miller, walking bank account and conversational vacuum." "Elena." Victoria's tone sharpened, though her smile remained smooth. "A woman of your standing should learn to appreciate stability." "I appreciate art," Elena replied, meeting her mother's eyes now. "And people who aren't made of marble." Her father exhaled, setting the paper aside. "You're 24. It's time to stop playing the rebel artist. This city remembers names, not moods." "That's funny," Elena said, leaning back in her chair. "I thought people remembered authenticity." A delicate silence followed, the kind that costs money to maintain. Somewhere down the corridor, a clock ticked, loud enough to sound judgmental. Victoria sighed through her nose and took another sip of tea. "Margaret Gray called this morning. She says the gallery is nearly ready for the Celestia Circle preview. She speaks highly of your dedication, though I do wish you'd stop wearing those dreadful sneakers to meetings. The press will be attending." Elena's lips curved. "I'll wear heels when I start lying for a living," Robert groaned quietly. "Must everything you say sound like a headline for Scandal?" "Only the interesting things," Elena said, smiling sweetly. Her mother set her teacup down, the porcelain clicking against the saucer like a small declaration of war. "I don't understand you, Elena." "You have every advantage, position, influence, education, yet you insist on acting like one of those free-spirited gallery people." "Gallery people?" Elena tilted her head. "You mean artists?" Robert muttered. "She means unwashed optimism." That earned the faintest smile from Elena despite herself. "At least they're alive," she murmured. Her mother ignored that. "Your future is here, with people who know how to protect what this family built. Gregory is patient. He understands the importance of legacy." Elena stood suddenly, the chair legs scraping against the marble floor, a small rebellion that echoed louder than it should have. "You mean he understands how to inherit it?" "Elena!" Victoria's voice was sharp, commanding, but the younger woman had already grabbed her jacket. "I have a meeting at the gallery," she said evenly. "Margaret actually values what I think. You should try it sometime." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind the clinking of silverware and the faint, elegant sound of her mother's composure cracking. Outside, the morning air bit at her cheeks. The gardens were immaculate, trimmed hedges, whispering fountains, roses so perfect they looked unreal. Every inch of the estate screamed order, but Elena had never felt more suffocated. She paused at the gate, looking back at the sprawling house that glittered in sunlight and expectation. "Stable futures," she muttered. "Stable cages." Her driver looked startled when she climbed into the car with such determination. "Where to, Miss Draven?" "The gallery," she said, tugging the seatbelt into place. "And take the long way. I'd like to remember what freedom feels like." As the car pulled away, she slumped back in her seat, letting the hum of the engine drown out her thoughts. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a tug, the familiar ache between duty and desire, the invisible thread she could never quite untangle. The streets of Viralia blurred past her window, sleek towers and crumbling walls standing shoulder to shoulder, the city's heartbeat messy and alive. She loved it that way, imperfect, honest. Her mind wandered to the upcoming Celestia Circle showcase, the event her mother considered a chess move, and she considered a chance for something real. Margaret Gray's gallery was helping organize it, bringing together established patrons and emerging artists. It should have been exciting. Instead, it felt like standing on a bridge and not knowing which side you belonged to. Her phone buzzed, a message from Gregory Miller. "Lunch today? We can talk about the dinner plans." Elena stared at it, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then she turned the phone face down and muttered, "We could also talk about wallpaper drying." She couldn't explain it, but the idea of another polite conversation about boats and reputation made her want to scream into a paint bucket. The gallery smelled like possibility and old varnish when Elena stepped inside, an entirely different world from the clipped calm of the Draven dining room. Margaret Gray greeted her at the threshold with the kind of smile that suggested secrets were currency and generosity was a practiced art. "Elena, you escaped," Margaret said, looping an arm through hers as if they were two conspirators in a plot to rescue culture from itself. "Elena!" She heard her mother's voice in her head, translated into all the small ways of a proper life. "Sit straighter, say less, smile more." But here, in Margaret's workshop, those instructions fell apart in the best possible way. Paint smudges on the floor, loose canvases leaned like casual confessions, a record spinning something jazzy and forgiving. Margaret guided her past an unfinished installation that looked like a forest of folded paper and wire. "We're finalizing the Celestia Circle roster," she said, voice practical and kind. "There's pressure from the foundation side for prestige, as expected, but I've insisted on a slice of unruly work. It's important the night breathes." Elena smiled because the woman beside her made sensible rebellion sound like a polite threat. "You called me because you wanted me not to let them make it too stiff," Elena said. "To keep it dangerous, or at least mildly unruly?" "Exactly." Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Dangerous enough to be interesting, considerate enough to be civilized. There's an art to compromise, and there's an art to slipping in a painter who paints from the rib cage rather than the resume." Elena craned her neck, scanning the stacks of names tacked to the studio wall. There were familiar letters, family names, gallery tags, sponsors, and one entry that made her pause. Ethan Hawthorne, independent. She'd heard the name before in scattered murmurs. A painter from Viralia whose cityscapes had a kind of rough human heartbeat. Margaret had mentioned the intriguing raw artist in passing at the Celestia planning meetings. Seeing his name on the roster made it suddenly real. "Ethan Hawthorne?" Elena asked, not quite a question. "He's in the roster?" Margaret smiled the way someone smiles when they watch a sapling grow toward sunlight. "I thought of him for a place of balance. You've always had an eye for work that bridges worlds. To be blunt, Elena, you favor truth over polish." Elena's cheeks warmed. "That's one way to say I hate dinner conversations." Margaret chuckled. "And that's why we need you." They moved deeper into the gallery, where assistants arranged chairs and a string quartet tuned in a corner like nervous birds. A young curator, her hair in a severe knot, handed Elena a stack of profiles. "These are emerging artists we want to highlight," she said. "We're calling them the New Edge, though that feels like a very dreadful marketing term." Elena skimmed the profiles, biographical sketches, small photographs, a line about each artist's temperament. Most were polished, rehearsed pieces. Then she lingered over Ethan's page. The photo didn't hide the roughness, that hair, the paint on the jawline in the picture, the earnest eyes. The writing under his profile read like honest shorthand: self-taught, community projects, paints life, not galleries. She felt something like recognition, not exactly personal, but like the tug of a familiar tune. "He paints bridges," she said aloud, surprising herself. "Not the architectural kind always, but bridges in the sense of people, of movement, of reaching." Margaret gave her a look that was both pleased and pleased with herself. Exactly. That's precisely why he should be there. The Celestia Circle needs someone who makes the gallery step outside itself for a moment. A part of Elena liked the idea fiercely. Another part, however, liked the idea for reasons she didn't want to name aloud yet: the way the bridge image had lodged in her at breakfast, the way its two sides implied a meeting. Her parents' world and the city of crooked murals and public laundromats could be coaxed into conversation, she thought. Maybe. "So," the knotted curator said briskly, "we've arranged a preview walkthrough tonight for donors and a smaller set of patrons. I would like your input on the set order and—" She glanced at Elena's outfit and corrected with the gentlest possible diplomacy. "Perhaps a softer shoe next time?" Elena shrugged and laughed. "Shoes can be arranged." She took another look around the room. The whole event felt like a chess game where the pieces were painted canvases instead of knights. It would be grand, the kind of event where people told each other how to be generous and meant it the way people mean rules. Margaret steered her toward a corner where a small cluster of paintings waited, half hidden by a drape. "There's one piece I want you to see before we hang everything. I thought of you when I first encountered it." She tugged at the fabric. The painting beneath was a night street. Lanterns blurred to gold, a narrow bridge cutting across a river that glittered like spilt coins. Houses leaned into each other as if to whisper secrets. The brushwork was broad, alive. It was not a painting meant to be admired politely. It was one that demanded a whispered argument with your chest. Elena felt a thrum under her sternum as if the painting had plucked a string inside her. "Who?" she began. Margaret's expression softened. "Unknown, for now. It came through one of the network donors with careful notes. They asked for inclusion for conversation rather than applause. I thought you might like the tenderness of its defiant brushwork." Elena's fingers drummed on the frame. "It says something about meeting halfway," she murmured. "Bridges that require both courage and a willingness to step toward the other side." Margaret nodded. "And perhaps a person to stand in the middle and watch the sides look at one another and wonder if it's possible to cross." She looked at Elena with a clarity that made her feel seen in a way no dinner table observation ever did. "People like that are rarer than we like to think." Elena felt an odd heat behind her ears and looked away. There was a small private pleasure in being recognized not for the family she came from, but for the particular taste of rebellion she cultivated. Margaret's unspoken compliment was a small electric current that eased something in her chest. Just then, an assistant came rushing in with another folder. "Miss Gray, the donor list has a last-minute adjustment. Mrs. Draven has also requested 2 additional seats near the front." The assistant's voice wavered. An addition from the Dravens to the front row felt like the deliberate placement of influence. Margaret's jaw set. "Of course. Make the adjustments, but we'll preserve the pulse of the evening. The conversation matters more than the seating chart." Elena bit her lip at Margaret's diplomatic stance. She thought of her mother's tiny, precise demands and felt a flare of irritation. Of course, her family would want the best seats, as if the view could be bought like a special cut of meat. And of course, Margaret refused to let the night be only about presentation. That refusal endeared her further to Elena. When Elena left the gallery that afternoon, the sky had feathered with clouds and the city smelled faintly of rain. She felt light, strangely buoyed, as if the gallery had slipped a wedge into a door it intended to open. On the way home, she stopped by a little bookstall in Old Town, fingers brushing spines, breathing in paper dust and human stories. A mural caught her eye, a child painting a bridge in bright colors. She paused and tapped the image with her thumb, like testing the surface of something that might in some days be real. Her phone buzzed with another message from Gregory. "Dinner with my parents Friday? It will be informative. I think you'll enjoy the conversation." Elena stared at the text and then at the mural. She typed nothing. Instead, she took a deep, theatrical breath and typed, "I'll bring my own questions." Then she hit send and felt a thrill at the defiance of 3 short words. That evening at the Draven estate, the household moved with ritual. Staff polished silver, menus were confirmed, and Victoria orchestrated the guest list like a conductor selecting phrases. Dinner conversations rehearsed themselves like lines from a play. Elena observed from the periphery, the way her mother smiled in angled arcs, the way her father's opinions arrived with measured cadence. She could see the room as if it were a stage, and the players were props. It made her feel both distant and sharper, a camera lens focusing. Her mother caught her eye and sent a smile of brittle approval. Elena returned it and then slipped into a conversation with a gallery director who wanted to gossip about the best printmakers. She listened politely but didn't let the small talk anchor her. Part of her wanted to slip back to Margaret's gallery to stand before that bridge painting and see what exact chord it struck in her. Halfway through the meal, a gentle commotion rose. The butler announced a late arrival. Elena's heart did a small, involuntary hop of curiosity. Perhaps it was a donor with a penchant for rare impressions, she thought, or an eccentric artist wearing something scandalous. It wasn't any of those. It was, predictably, a respectable family friend, another guest who would nod politely at family connections and sip port like ritual. He had a kind smile and a tie that said, "I have read economy reports for recreation." Elena smiled at him with the practiced warmth of someone who could be charming when the performance called for it. She moved through the evening with small acts of kindness and sharper edges of reticence. The Draven's world enveloped her, as it always did. But tonight, there was another place she'd been standing in her head, where paint made people feel and bridges did not require invitations. That night, in the privacy of her room, after the lights were dimmed and the staff had retreated into the quiet architecture of their schedules, Elena sat by her window and pulled the gallery roster out of her bag. Her thumb traced Ethan Hawthorne's name again. She thought of the painting she'd seen in the gallery and the way Margaret had looked at her when she spoke about bridges. She wrote a few lines in her notebook, quick, messy script that felt honest. "Maybe some bridges need someone to stand in the middle and keep the sides honest," she scribbled. She felt not certain but curious, and that was a new thing for her. And somewhere in Varelia, in a different kind of stillness, a painter would be turning a canvas and not yet knowing that across town someone had paused at his name and allowed curiosity to settle like a small light.